The time is at hand.
Nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains in Williamson, West Virginia, this is In Dark Places. Crackheads Unite. Just kind of been sitting in the background, shaking my head in utter bewilderment for what's happening in the world these days. Nothing ever surprises me anymore. Anything goes. We got these data centers popping up all over the place. You heard about these? They put these off as they're going to make the world a safer place. We need this kind of stuff in our lives. Have you read any kind of stories or anything about these data centers that require like millions of gallons of water just to function on a daily basis? Where's this water going to come from? They're going to require tons of electricity. Who's going to pay that electric bill? On average, they cover 5 square miles for each one of these data centers. Just going to destroy all that land and build one of these things. There's one being built, or maybe it is completely built now, in Utah, I think it is. I might ask Brandon about this. He watches this kind of stuff. Somewhere out west, I want to say Utah. There's a data center being built that is going to be visible from space. It's not going to benefit people in any way. Each one of these data centers will employ about 40 people. What's that going to do? That's not going to help anybody. I saw a video of this one guy who was actually for the data centers. He voted for it. He said, yeah, that's a good thing. So they built this thing in his neighborhood, and now he just hears this constant motorized humming all through his house, and there's not a thing he can do to stop it. It's just everywhere in the neighborhood. Everybody hears it there. Which brings me to the next topic at hand. Here in this neck of the woods around Williamson, West Virginia, tourism has become huge here in the last 5 or 6 years. People come from all over the country to come to Williamson to ride their four-wheelers, big side-by-side, all-terrain vehicles, those things, dirt bikes, what have you. No one voted on this. It's not like our vote wouldn't matter anyway. The government is just going to do whatever they want to do. Elections, voting, all that stuff is just an illusion to make people think that they have a say-so in what happens in their world. It don't mean a thing. The government just decided this is going to be fun. It'll be a good little source of income for our little pathetic dying town, which is being overrun by crackheads. So what's happening is that people in town are dying off and their houses are just sitting empty. People are fixing these places up and renting them out for the trail riders. There's big money in it. They charge these guys like $700 a week to stay at their little house. And they actually do it. Have more brains than money, I guess. And it just keeps increasing, multiplying every day. You see tons of out-of-state vehicles around. And they proudly display how rich they are with their big $100,000 trucks loaded down with a trailer full of these side-by-sides and four-wheelers and such. I'm all for it. It's fun. I enjoy being out in nature. I get it. But we've got thousands of these people just kind of invading our little town here on a daily basis. They drive these side-by-sides out on the highway, and they don't have to pay any kind of license or insurance or anything like all of us normal people. And we have to have license and insurance and everything. So it doesn't really seem fair. And I guess the speed limit doesn't apply to these guys either. You see these side-by-sides driving 80, 90 miles an hour down the road, right by police cars. Police doesn't do a thing about it because there's too much tax money involved in it. Too many governmental kickbacks. They have these Hatfield and McCoy trails just scattered around all over Williamson. And one of these trails goes right by my house, up the holler where I live. These loud, obnoxious vehicles, side-by-sides, four-wheelers, dirt bikes, just ride up and down the road, right by our house, all hours of the day. Sounds like they're just running right through our living room. We get no peace and quiet here. It makes recording this show kind of difficult, because I have to keep pausing for the four-wheeler to go by. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying about that guy who hears the constant humming in his house because of the data centers. We just constantly hear these vehicles loud, playing music. A lot of times they'll have these Bluetooth speakers hooked up on the back of their four-wheelers and stuff. We hear loud music. This used to be a nice little peaceful, quiet community. You could sleep, you could watch TV and stuff. Now you just can't really do nothing because all you hear is the sound of these guys on these four-wheelers. Oh, check it out. Here comes one right now. Just like that. Normally, I edit stuff like that out, or push pause and quit recording or whatever, wait for the four-wheeler to go by. But I was just talking about it, so that's what I have to deal with all the time. At all hours of the night, they wake us up. Sometimes they rattle our windows, and it never ends. Sometimes it feels like I'm living in a parallel universe or something. This isn't the world that I knew. It's like a glitch in the Matrix. And that reminds me, this week on the show, we have some glitches in the Matrix. My family used to have a cabin at a large lake development. Over the summer, when the pool and beach area were crowded, people would drive to a spillway at the dam to swim because it was relatively shallow and warm. I hated going to the spillway because we lived on the side of the lake where you had to drive down a narrow, steep gravel road to get to the dam, which was also too narrow to pass on. The backside of the dam was very steep as they quarried out the bottom and the sides of the ravine for fill for the dam. I would close my eyes and hold my breath anytime we drove by there, and left permanent impressions in the door handle from squeezing it so tightly. One night I had a dream that my family decided to spend a weekend out there and have a barbecue at our cabin. During that dream, my parents decided to take us to the spillway to swim. On the way across the dam, there was a rusty maroon Ford Ranger coming across the dam at us. It still sticks in my mind over 20 years later. He was speeding across, leaving a huge dust cloud, and lost control right in front of us, hitting us and sending us down the back of the dam. I remember the car flipping and rattling down the hill, getting crushed and gravel flying through the windows. Finally, the car stopped, and I remember seeing my sister bloodied and unconscious. At this point, I was so scared. I finally woke up. It felt so real, and is probably the scariest dream of my life to this date. Now to the point. The next morning, my parents decided to go to the cabin. No big deal. We went there quite a bit over the summers. Had to be a coincidence. We'd go to the cabin and barbecue. My dad had a few to drink and decided that we should go swimming. Everyone decided that the spillway sounded the most fun that day, and I started getting a little nervous with that dream so fresh in my mind. I suggested the pool or the beach to try to sway their minds. It didn't work. It almost seemed like they knew about my dream and wanted it to come true. So we start cleaning up and loading the vehicle, and my mom asked me to put the roaster in the vehicle to take home. I was so worried about that rusty maroon Ford Ranger by this point that I knew I had to do something. So I put the roaster in the cabin and would mention on the way that I forgot it and try to say that we should just forget swimming and go home because I wasn't feeling well. We leave, and about halfway to the dam I mentioned that I forgot the roaster. My mom decides to turn around to get it. Back at the cabin I mentioned that I'm not feeling well. The response, well, you can just sit in the shade and take it easy. Heading back to the dam, I was so worked up that we were all going to die, that I was shaking so badly. My mom asked me if I was cold or had a fever. As we rounded the bend to head down the narrow road of impending death, the rusty maroon Ford Ranger flew past us, almost hitting us. I went into shock. I didn't even know what to do or say, but realized that by turning around for that roaster must have been just enough time to let the truck cross the dam. I can still remember what the guy looked like. I can still see the green leaves being rustled from the speed of his truck, and I can still taste the dust that was in the air as we drove across the dam. This is the first time I've ever mentioned this, as I thought everyone would consider me crazy for such a thing. I saved my family with a roaster. I watched the movie Radio 7 years before it was ever made. My dad came into my room with the DVD and asked me if I wanted to watch it with the family. I declined, saying that when I watched it a few years ago, I didn't like it. He stared at me and said, "It literally just came out." When I watched it again, it was exactly how I remembered it. In 2012, I was walking to a train stop near the Lower Haight in San Francisco. A young guy, somewhere in the range of 18 to 24 years old, is walking toward me and looking directly at me as he approaches. He gets within about 10 feet and he starts raising his arm up and holding out his hand. I have been chased by a homeless guy with a broom in my Soma recently, so my mind instantly goes to, he wants to kill me. He opens up his hand and holds out a penny. He pauses to put it in my hand and says, "Today is your lucky day," and then walks away without an explanation. 3 months later, I was walking down State Street in Ann Arbor, Michigan, right outside the Upper Michigan Law School. I see someone walking toward me, and they hold out their hand. I don't remember if it was a boy or a girl, or if it looked like the same person. They too put a penny in my hand and say, "Today is your lucky day," and walk on. Completely freaked out, I shout, "Who are you?" They just kept walking on. I spent the next 2 hours Googling, trying to find some sort of pay it forward movement where people do this, but I didn't find anything. To this day, it's the most confounding and inexplicable coincidence, or is it, that I've ever experienced. My parents owned their own business, only about a 5-minute drive away from our house. For years, they only had one employee, so most of the time both of my parents would be at work together. During the slower seasons, my mom would often be at home for a few hours of the day, doing the accounting or running errands, and on rare occasions, my dad would come home for a few minutes checking his private collection for an item for a friend or a special customer. When my dad was alone at work, he would usually call home at least once an hour to talk to me or my mom out of pure loneliness. When I was about 15 to 16, I was home in my basement watching TV. My mom was home, but had just stepped outside to walk her dogs. My dad was at work. My mom couldn't have been gone more than 10 minutes when I heard my dad open the front door, kick off his shoes into our garage. Both doors have very distinct opening and closing sounds, and the sound carries well since we don't have many doors. Next, he walks up the 8 stairs in the heavy-footed manner he always does, and walks across the hardwood floors past the open upstairs living room, which was directly over my head, through the dining area and into the kitchen. This couldn't have been more than 10 or 11 steps, but it's important to emphasize that it's a large open space with plenty of wooden flat surfaces that act as a weird amplifier, so you can hear everything clearly from downstairs where I was. I hear him stop and take a glass from the cupboard and fill it from the fridge. The machine made a light rolling sound, and as the glass filled, the pitch of the running water increased until it was full. Once the sound stopped, there was only silence. I, of course, assumed he was drinking and paid no mind to it, but it lasted eerily long. Next, I hear the outside tap running, breaking the silence and signaling that my mom was home from walking the dogs and filling their water dish. Seconds pass by, and she comes in the front door. I still haven't heard any more noise from the kitchen, so assuming my dad didn't move, at this point my mom and dad would be able to see each other with zero effort, but they were not talking. Just then the phone rang, and my mom asked me to answer it. It was my dad calling, lonely and bored at work. I asked him if he had just been home, and he asked me if I was high before laughing and asking to talk to my mom. To this day, my dad still just thinks I was high, but my mom has had the same experience I had a couple times. Once before mine, and one since I moved out. It still weirds me out when I think about my ghost dad. My parents' house has a thirsty ghost that walks like my dad. My best friend, who is now deceased, was in Atlanta for work. He decided to go see some Olympic stuff and had a good time. He got a call from work while there demanding he get back immediately. He left quick, got out of his car. Just as he was pulling away, the Atlanta Olympic bombing happened. His seat 40-ish feet from the epicenter of the blast. He would have been killed. Second, massive quake in San Francisco. Second cousin driving across the bridge. Just as he gets off it, a chunk goes out. Funny thing is, he got out of the house a couple minutes early because his wife, Sue, had started the car for him while he got his kit together. Close call. Third, woke up after a particularly vivid dream about the bridge. Cousin's oldest brother. We chatted, had a good time, etc. 30 seconds after waking up, I get a call that he just died in a house fire. When I was 6 or 7, I remember going to school in the morning and being in class, playing with my friends. I suddenly have to go to the bathroom. So I asked my teacher, and as I walk out of the classroom door, I'm suddenly at home, getting my shoes on before going to school. I wonder sometimes if I imagined it or not, because it seems so impossible. But I remember every detail about it. Basically, every new friend I make inevitably texts me to let me know that they just saw someone who looks exactly like me in a place where I wasn't. Or when I meet them for the first time, they say I look just like someone they already know. I think my doppelganger is stalking me. When I was 14, I had a dream where I was robbed and then stabbed. The next day I was mugged. I told the guy that I had nothing with me. He tried to stab me with a fairly dull knife and barely missed me. I ran. I had $120 and a crappy phone in my pocket. When I was about 7 years old, I fell asleep in my parents' bed. I remember standing in the doorway watching my father pick my sleeping body up out of his bed and carry me into my room. I was standing in the doorway watching and moved out of the way for him to get past me, but I don't think he even saw me. An earlier time I remember sitting in my little rocking chair in my bedroom at approximately 5 years of age, playing with my doll or a teddy bear. I remember watching myself play with it. I was standing behind myself, just watching and listening. I never said anything. This is the strongest one that comes to my mind. I was a senior in high school, and it was the first day of class. Our school had an advocate program where only the freshmen came to school on the very first day, and the upperclassmen who were involved with the advocate program would take them in groups and show them around / help them out all day in order for them to easily adjust to high school. After I had finished giving my tour, I saw a freshman struggling to get into his locker. I walked over and asked if he needed help figuring it out. He said the combination he was given on his course schedule didn't seem to be working. I asked him if I could take a shot at it, and he handed me his schedule and the locker combination on it. I read it to myself and then spoke to him out loud something along the lines of, "Okay, so it shows here that the combination is 13, 36, 24. So let's try that." He gave me a kind of puzzled look, but I shrugged it off and entered the combination I had just read off. The locker opened without any problems on the first try. I then turned to him with the schedule in my hand and began to reiterate the combination so that he would remember it and wouldn't enter it wrong. I looked down at the combination on the schedule, and to my astonishment, the numbers were in a different order than what I had read off the first time, or entered into the locker, something like 34, 16, 23. I had to stop and told him that I had no idea how that had just happened, and now I realized why he gave me a puzzled look when I read off the combination that was different from what was written on his schedule. To be safe, I tried the written combination, and the locker didn't open. I tried the combination that I saw in my head the first time, and the locker opened again. Crazy. Sometimes I'll be walking somewhere, I look up at something, and suddenly I have no idea where I'm going or where I am. It's only dangerous when I'm driving. I also found a dead raccoon my Girl Scout troop when I was 10 years old. It's pretty clear that it was deceased. It was all squished up, guts out, the usual. So we pass it and look back one more time, having been sad that the animal had died so gruesomely. So I turn back and the raccoon is fine, alive and well, no blood or guts, nothing. My troop leader is screaming at me, telling me to go back away from the raccoon. I do. Even at 10, I wasn't an idiot. And nobody seems to remember that maybe 2 minutes ago it was dead. I used to be in forensics, which was basically competitive acting/drama, and we had a regional competition at our school. At the end, we all celebrated our wins with some soda, store-bought cookies, and other things of that nature. The school we were in was recently rebuilt, as in that was the second year it had been open, as the old building was really dilapidated and had all this terrible wiring and AC. Anyway, my friend and I went outside of the room we were in and chilled out against the wall, and we closed our eyes and almost fell asleep. A few minutes later, we both bolted up, feeling weirdly awake, despite the fact that we'd been up for over 14 hours. The hallway was empty, and no one on our forensics team was in the room we had been in or in the hallway. We decided to look near the main doors for everyone, and then we discovered something very strange. Near the front of the doors, the large double glass ones in most middle schools and high schools, was a heavily tinted glass door that had not been there before. We both had been going to this school ever since it was rebuilt and walked past that area every morning, but both of us knew the door had not previously been there. The mysterious door was unlocked, and inside was a blank, off-white, bricked room with no other windows or doors. When we left our room, thoroughly freaked out, a janitor was inside when we left the room, and he asked us what we were doing, and we said that the room had never been there before. He smiled and said that it's always been there, and locked the door. He left chuckling. We asked everyone about the door, and they said it had always been there. They said that we probably hadn't noticed it, or we were tired. We knew it hadn't been there. We still don't know how the door got there, or why it was an empty brick room. I dreamt about the Space Shuttle Challenger exploding the night before it happened. I was in 7th grade at the time, and not really even following current events that much. I spoke to my social studies teacher about it the following morning, and she just kind of dismissively nodded, like, yeah, that's very odd. We all went to the library to watch the shuttle launch live. I started getting nervous. Deja vu. My stomach was in knots during the countdown. Once it took off, I breathed a sigh of relief, only to have that relief turn to shock when the space shuttle exploded. I looked over at the teacher I had told about it earlier, and she looked at me with her mouth open slightly, agape, while the color drained from her face. She refused to ever talk about it again with me. Maybe I was her glitch in the Matrix. I had 2 porcelain plates sitting in a drying rack by the sink. I grabbed one and placed it in the cupboard. I turn around and there's 2 plates drying on the rack. I somehow duped a plate and ended up with 3 plates. This happened around 2000. I was sitting in shop class in high school, and for some reason I just tore off a piece of paper and wrote, "The fire alarm is going to go off at 2:43, and threw it to this girl, Amy, who was sitting across from me. She read it and looked at me weird, and that was that. About 10 minutes later, the fire alarm goes off. I looked up at the clock, and it was exactly 2:43. To this day, I have no idea how I knew. It freaked Amy out, too. I was once carried, quote, down my stairs by no one. You know, the king's chair carry. Yeah, that. Just casually floated. One time my brother was going to beat 7 kinds of crap out of me. I'd done something. But by the time he clenched his fists, I was in another room on the floor. He just came in the room like, "What?" asking how I can move so fast. One blink and you were gone. I like to think that I'm the future of humankind. You never know. One night while I was playing CS, whatever that could be, on my desktop, it was around 2003, out of the corner of my eye I noticed my wife walk into our laundry room. I thought nothing of it because it happened all the time. I finished a few rounds and then get up to go to the kitchen. I walked past the laundry room expecting to find her, but she's not there. I walked into the kitchen. I called out her name and she replied from the bedroom at the other end of the house. Weird. I go to the bedroom and asked if she had just went to the laundry room. She said, "No, I've not been there since we had dinner." I told her that I must have hallucinated. Before I write the next part, I want to say that in no way at all do I believe in ghosts, spirits, etc. Disclaimer. The house that we were living in had recently been occupied by a woman who passed away in the hospital. We purchased it from the owners who lived in Germany. The woman was an artist and had left behind several pieces which were intriguing. Flash forward about a month, and I run into a friend who actually knew the woman who lived there. I had a mental picture in my mind of what this woman looked like because of the art she left behind and the fact that she passed away in the hospital. I thought she would have been in her late 60s, but what my friend told me was chilling to say the least. Turns out she was my age. So I naturally asked what she looked like, and he told me, "She looks a lot like your wife. Same size, dark hair, etc." I have not had chills like that since I was a child. Not enough to make a believer out of me, but strange nonetheless. After my first son was born over 40 years ago, I had two experiences that freaked me out completely. Both were vivid and detailed. One was profound and emotional, and the other was mundane and out of the blue. But for some reason it scared me more. I was 20 years old, a new mother, and rented a house in an old neighborhood in Austin, Texas. Across the street lived a couple I'll call beautiful and handsome. Maybe just a few years older than me. Beautiful was tall. Beautiful was extroverted. Handsome was handsome, quiet, and part owner of a local restaurant. I would say hi and briefly chat with them when I was out walking my baby. And I thought they were nice, but I'd never socialized with either of them beyond that. One night, I had a dream that beautiful, handsome, and I were out at a bar late at night, sitting at a round table. We'd all ordered a coffee, and we were waiting for our drinks to come, and suddenly Beautiful said, "Hey, we should have whipped cream on those. They're so much better that way. I'll go ask the bartender." She got up and left the table. I looked over at Handsome, and he had an intense, "now we're finally alone" look on his face. He reached over and took my hand with both of his, and I felt trapped and embarrassed. I woke up. That morning I went out for a walk with my baby, and when I was passing by Beautiful and Handsome's house, Beautiful was in the front yard, and she called to me and said, "Hey, Mad Bear, we just finished sanding our floors yesterday, and they're so gorgeous. I'm so excited. Come in and see them." I'd never been in their house before, but was happy for the invitation. She walked in, oohed and awed at the floors, and then she said, "Handsome's at the hardware store picking up a few things. Do you have time for a cup of tea?" I was flattered that she was extending a new friendship opportunity. Being a young single mom was lonely, and said yes. We walked into the kitchen, and there was a round white table. The dream had come back to me in that moment, and I started feeling odd. Beautiful opened a cupboard. There were dozens of pretty celestial seasoning boxes, all neatly stacked. I think she had every flavor they made back then. She turned to me and said, "It's Saturday. I don't have anywhere to go, do you?" I said, "No." And she said, "Well, how about a beer instead?" I laughed and said, "That's weird. I had a dream that we had drinks together last night." And she kind of halted for a second and said, "Really?" in an overly polite tone that betrayed she might be having second thoughts about inviting me into her home. So I kept the rest to myself and sat down. My baby was in a frontal carrier sleeping, just in case you were wondering what happened to him. Beautiful poured the drink and was chatting pretty consistently, and then she interrupted herself and said, "Hey, I've even got whipped cream. Let's go all the way." And just then the door opened, and Handsome came in, home from the hardware store. He said, "That looks great. I'll have one," and sat down to join us. So here we are, the three of us, sitting at a round table, drinking these drinks with whipped cream, and I'm getting so uncomfortable my skin is crawling, and the room is spinning a little bit. The phone rings. It's Beautiful's mother calling from California. Beautiful excuses herself and leaves the room to talk to her mom. Handsome and I are left at the table. I stand up very awkwardly and suddenly say, "Thanks for the coffee, have to go," and basically run out of the house. Like I said, it was mundane. No life saved, no parallel universe vision of myself, but just too detailed and out of the blue to feel okay about. And with that, I think that's about all the big show for today. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you. I'll see you again next week. God bless.